The Dick Van Dyke Show. Starring Dick Van Dyke. Rosemary, Maury Amsterdam, Larry Matthews, and Mary Tyler Moore.
Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is KJ Ricardo. Today's episode is a look at my list of the top 10 episodes of Season 2 of The Dick Van Dyke Show. We're getting into my Season 2 content, which is pretty exciting. I love Season 2. I think it's even a little bit better than Season 1. So let's get started. Number 10 is It May Look Like a Walnut. This is a very classic episode. It's considered to be one of the best episodes of The Dick Van Dyke Show, so I had to include it on my list. In this episode, Rob and Laura are watching a science fiction film. Rob tries to make Laura even more scared than she already is, but in the episode, he has a dream. So it's a dream episode. Everything that happened in the science fiction film comes true. He is living in the science fiction film. He goes to the office. Everyone is eating walnuts, which was a part of the film. And so he's like, what the heck is going on? He comes home and we get the very classic moment where he opens the closet door and all of these walnuts fall out with Laura in the closet. And then later on, she shows that she has two eyes on the back of her head, which is another part of the film. Lastly, everyone comes out and is taunting Rob, including their guest star, Danny Thomas. So it's a nice episode. It's not my favorite, but it is pretty good. Number 9 is The Night the Roof Fell In. I really like this episode. In this episode, Rob and Laura are having a very extreme argument / fight. Their fight gets so intense that Rob decides to leave. He's going to walk out for the night. The very next day, we get both sides of the story. Rob goes to the office and he tells Buddy and Sally his version of what happened. In his story, he's very charismatic, very charming to Laura, and Laura is dressed up in like baggy clothes. She acts like she could care less if he's even there. At the same time, Laura has Millie over and she's telling Millie her version of the story. In her story, Rob comes home very angry and Laura is dressed up very elegant, very sexy, and he doesn't even notice that. And so he's very angry. He kicks the ottoman and it's just hilarious to see both versions of the story. And we know that neither version actually happened. And that's what makes this episode so great. So I love it. Number 8 is When a Bowling Pin Talks, Listen. In this episode, Richie is watching a television show about a talking bowling pin. He finds it so hilarious that he tells Rob this story idea. Rob thinks it's an original idea that Richie just came up with. And so he goes to the office the next day and he tells Buddy and Sally about this idea. He acts it out in front of them, this talking bowling pin, which is pretty great to see. But their coffee guy comes in and he sees them writing like this comedy sketch and says, that's not an original idea. That was on a show last night. And so they realize, we done goofed. And so they think they're going to get fired and they go to Alan Brady and Alan takes care of it and it all works out in the very end, which is great because otherwise they probably would have been fired. Number 7 is Ray Murdock's X-Ray. This is another great episode. In this episode, it's actually the first time Jerry Paris, who plays Jerry on the show, it's his first directing debut. And so he would go on to direct many more episodes of The Dick Van Dyke Show, but this was his very first one. In this episode, Rob is on Ray Murdock's X-Ray show, and he's being interviewed, but it's more like he's being interrogated. He's asked questions, and he eventually tells America that most of his comedy sketches are based off of Laura and her wackiness. And so he goes home and he tries to distract Laura from watching the show. He doesn't want her to watch it. But eventually she watches the show. She hears what he had to say about her. And so she gets very upset. She thinks that people are going to make fun of her. She's going to be the laughingstock of the town and everything. And so eventually she gets a phone call and someone wants to do a story about her. And so that makes her excited. And she's like, oh, I will tell people my side of the story. And it works out. Number 6 is all about eavesdropping. I love this episode. It is so great. In this episode, Rob and Laura have an intercom system set up with Millie and Jerry. So they overhear Millie and Jerry talking about them, and it's not very nice stuff. So they get upset. They're supposed to go to a dinner party at Millie and Jerry's. They arrive late. They are upset. They are very cold. They barely talk. It's so great to see this. They don't tell people what's wrong. And my favorite scene of this episode is the charades game. They're acting out, and it's so hilarious. I have a clip of this scene. Thought it would do it better justice than me talking about it. So enjoy.
Your team goes first.
Okay. Here, Laura, you want to go first?
Please, Jerry, I don't think so.
Oh, come on. You don't want to ruin the party.
I never ruined a party before in my life, Jerry.
Well, of course you haven't, so go ahead. Good. Come on, Rob. We'll beat him. Let's go. We can do it. You and I in the same team. Come on. Okay, ready? It's a song title. First word. Over. A beat. Pat.
Crush. Destroy.
What? Oh, second word. Okay, second. Little word. Small.
Petty. Hypocritical. Two-faced.
That's a song title?
Second word is petty, two-faced.
You can do the whole thing. The whole thing. Okay. March.
Yeah. Walk. Stomp. Stomp all over people. Walk all over people. Goose step. Treachery. Treachery. Two-faced. Two-faced. Stab. Stab in the back. Stab in the back.
Point. Point. Finger. Finger.
Accuse. Indict. Malicious accusory. That's right. Pearl Harbor. I got it.
What is it?
On the street where you live.
Number 5 is Somebody Has to Play Cleopatra. This is another great episode. In this episode, Rob has been volunteered kind of to lead this this musical performance with the community. And so they're going to do Anthony and Cleopatra. Somebody has to play Cleopatra. At first, it's Millie, and Jerry eventually doesn't like that Millie is kissing the guy who's playing Anthony. And so he decides to replace Millie with Laura. And so Laura is acting out this scene. And Rob doesn't like the kissing scene either. So he's like, nope, Laura's not going to be in this show. And so they eventually replace her with the script girl. And she, at first it seems like she's a nerdy little school teacher, but she's a very elegant, classy woman. And so eventually the guy who's playing Anthony, his wife, doesn't want her to be it. So it's like, who's going to play Cleopatra? And so it's a pretty great episode. Number 4 is Don't Trip Over That Mountain. I love this episode. This episode involves Rob and Jerry going on a skiing trip. Rob has never gone skiing before, and so this could be a disaster. And Laura thinks that he's going to trip on this mountain. And she thinks, I'm thinking this, and so Rob's going to trip over this mountain just in spite of me. And so that's really hilarious to see. But Rob does trip over the mountain. He ends up being really injured. He can't feel anything from like his lip down. There's like one part on his body that he actually can feel. But the rest of it, he has a sprained body. So he doesn't want Laura to find out. So he tries to cover it up. He doesn't want her to know that he injured himself. And that is what makes this episode so great. I love it. Number 3 is the attempted marriage. I love this episode so much, mostly because it's a flashback episode. I think the Dick Van Dyke Show does a great job with flashback episodes. So this episode, it discusses when Laura and Rob got married. He asks her to be his wife. She says yes. But on the day of their wedding, Rob is out with thinking. He's just having some thoughts. And his car doesn't start. So he is fixing his car. He knows he's going to be late. So he trips, he injures himself, and he eventually makes it to the church, but he missed the wedding. He's late. And I think this episode is just so great because it's comedic, it involves Rob, his physical comedy, and it's just so original with them, like him missing the wedding. And eventually, of course, we know, because we know the future, they got married. And so I really love this episode. Number 2 is The Two Faces of Rob. This is another great episode. Now, in this episode, Rob thinks that he can trick Laura by disguising his voice. And so he calls her and says, like, starts speaking in an Italian accent, thinking that he can fool Laura. And she actually falls for it, he thinks. And so she starts flirting back, and he's like, well, what is going on? And he comes home that night, and she's dressed very elegantly, and she starts singing the song that he was saying, and everything. It's just so great. She's playing him on. She really is. So the very next day, he calls her back and starts speaking in the Italian accent, and he thinks that she's falling for it again. He asks her to dinner, and she agrees to meet him. And so I have a clip of like where she actually knows it's Rob the whole time, and so it's pretty great. Enjoy.
That will be just fine.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci? Who was that?
Huh? Oh, that was Rob.
And then the episode ends with Laura coming home that night. It's like, where were you? I was waiting for you. So it comes out to Rob that she knew it was him the whole time. So it's so great. Here are some honorable mentions because I really like more than 10 episodes, so I decided to include some honorable mentions. I also really like A Man's Teeth Are Not His Own. It's a great episode between Rob and Jerry. As well as The Cat Burglar, another great episode. A Surprise is a Surprise. It's a hilarious episode involving Rob's birthday. What's in a Middle Name is another great flashback episode. As well as Will You Two Be My Wife? Another great flashback episode. It really proves that Dick Van Dyke knows how to do flashback episodes. But my number 1 pick is My Husband Is Not a Drunk. I love this episode so much. In this episode, they're having a dinner party. They invite a hypnotist over. So they decide to have demonstrations. Laura is hypnotized, as well as Millie, Jerry, and Buddy. But while Buddy is being hypnotized, Rob kind of intercepts this. He's in the kitchen. He gets hypnotized at the same time to be drunk whenever you hear a bell ring. So that's great, but he never gets out of the hypnotism. And so for the rest of the episode, the very next day at the office, he's still hypnotized. He's under the spell. Every time a bell rings, the telephone rings, his typewriter rings, everything, he becomes roaring drunk. And one of my favorite moments of this episode is when the sponsor is in the office and Rob is just drunk as can be, trying to get the telephone out of his jacket. It's so great. I have a clip of this very classic moment, so enjoy.
Comedy routine.
Yeah, that's very amusing. Yeah.
Gentlemen, will you please try and control yourselves? There is a poor girl stuck in the lining of my jacket. And I think that I may have to operate on her.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you see, he's playing drunk, and there's a girl.
Rob, you don't have to go as far as throwing your jacket.
Sir, I am a doctor. To save this young girl, I would have cut off my pants and my diploma. What do you think of that, Dr. Zorba?
Rob!
If you're squeamish of mind, why don't you turn to another channel?
Now, that's the kind of sketch I want to see on Alan's show this week.
That's what we planned.
Well, good.
Oh. How do you feel, Marge? That's good. Marge, do not laugh too hard, or you will rip your stitches.
Rip your stitches. I like it.
Oh, Dr. Zorba. Just because I disobeyed you, you didn't have to cut off all your hair.
That's a very funny routine, Rob. Now it's time for our meeting.
Oh, that's marvelous. Just have a meeting. Excuse me, won't you?
So there you have it. These are my top 10 episodes from season 2. Of course, there are many fabulous episodes from season 2. This season is really great. I think the writers and everyone involved in the show stepped up their game a little bit, and we're really producing some excellent episodes for their viewers. And so I really like this season. I'm going to keep working through this season, showing you more episodes like I did with season 1. So I hope you enjoy that. Let me know what your favorite episodes. If you can give me your top 10 episodes in a comment, I will be happy to read that. Thanks for watching, and make sure that you are subscribed to my channel. So if you haven't clicked the subscription button yet, click that right now so you can join me on this journey of going through the Dick Van Dyke episodes, especially as season 2, as we discuss season 2. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week with another video. And remember to always laugh often.